Well, we're excited to have you on the show today. If for folks that don't know you, I know a lot of folks in the essential oil community know you, but could you just tell us your name and then tell us a little bit about your backstory and what led you to start combining CBD with essential oils? And of course, we know you're the author of CBD and Essential Oils book, which is a really, really good book, well written, easy to understand. But just give folks a little bit of a background on who you are and what made you kind of delve into this world of CBD and essential oils.
Yeah, so very brief background. My name is Olivier Wenker. I'm a physician originally from Switzerland. My training included mostly emergency medicine and disaster medicine, and then cardiac and cardiopulmonary medicine. And that's how I got to the U.S., working in Houston with some of the world-renowned specialists here that invented heart surgery. And then I worked at MD Anderson in the ICUs. And long story short, I retired about 5-6 years ago to really turn my full attention to alternative medicine, integrated medicine, because I kind of had it with the way putting like bandages over diseases and not addressing the root cause. So, and that brings me then, of course, to essential oils and also CBD, just in general, to plant material, because that's where integrated medicine goes, and alternative medicine, where we look at the interaction between the environment and the human body. And God created our body to interact with plants. So plants are not just here to look at because they look pretty, like in sense bringing home some nice flowers or looking at the nice backyard. Plants are not just here to eat healthy food like vegetarians would, or vegans, and or even meat eater together with plants. But plants are here to interact with the human body. There will be no health without interactions, without plants. And why do I say this with certainty? That's kind of a new way to look at things. And when it comes to essential oils, a gentleman called Gary Young already looked at this way 30, 40 years ago without even having the scientific background that we have today and the literature that will show us that. Our body is full of what we call receptors. I mean, there are hundreds of them. And in fact, they all interact with components from plants. I mean, not just with hormones that we release in our body. And one of the ways we release hormones is also directed by plant materials. So at the end of the day, we are really created by the Creator to work together with plants. And this is how I got to essential oils and then eventually to CBD. And then, of course, there was not a long stretch to think about combining the two.
So what motivated you to actually combine the two? Are you a pioneer in that realm, or is this something that you had heard about from somebody else, the actual combining essential oils with CBD?
No, I think I'm probably the pioneer on that because I did that, 10 years ago, whatever. And I would assume I'm a pioneer of that because at that time, it's only legal to use CBD at home since 2014 for research purposes. Before that, it was really only research related and mostly done in approved research institutions. There was only one field in the U.S. that was allowed to grow it in Missouri at that time. And of course, now with the law having changed, and first the 2014 Farm Bill and now the 2018 Farm Bill, things have changed dramatically. So I've been using CBD for quite a while, and of course, it didn't take long for me to start combining them with CBD. And then when Gary Young was here at my house, we also looked at combining that together. I clearly then wanted to have some of his knowledge on the essential oil. He was the foremost specialist there. And so, I wrote this book now, The Power of CBD and Essential Oil, which is really a first of its kind. I mean, nobody really has done any research in that field yet. And so it's like a lot of stuff I'm writing is really looking at science and looking at receptors and starting to understand not just how CBD or THC would work on these receptors, and maybe they work not on receptors, they sometimes work over enzyme systems. I mean, it's just like the body is pretty complicated, and stuff doesn't always work with the one step. Sometimes it's around 3 or 4 corners. And then the same thing, of course, I'm looking at, with the essential oils. And I looked at what's available in the medical literature on these essential oils and the interaction with these receptors. And now comes the fascinating thing. I'm just seeing that CBD and some of the essential oils have very, very similar action on the human body based on what we know from human research. and even animal research. And then I'm also looking at the essential oil, and I see that they touch basically the same receptors. We have that research today. So, what I have been doing for years, kind of just going with my gut, the gut feeling, now is really starting to show that there is a lot behind that. But we still have to wait for the research to catch up. There's really no research on combining essential oils with CBD. Why? Because CBD wasn't legal yet. So we don't have that research yet, but it's coming. I mean, it's going to come pretty quickly, I'm pretty sure, because it's just too good to not do.
Right. The floodgates are definitely open, and we're seeing just, a lot more research being done these days. But with respect to essential oils and CBD, where did you start? I mean, what was just real quickly, let's cover what was like the first, essential oil you combine with CBD, and why would you do that, in a compliant manner? Why did you decide to go ahead and combine those two, that particular oil and CBD?
Yeah, let me give you a very legal answer. So
Sure.
Legally, I started in 2014 when the Farm Bill started allowing me to do that. Right?
I love that answer.
And at that time, of course, we didn't have isolates, so I started using what we call a full spectrum. So maybe this is the moment just to give a quick overview: what is full spectrum, what is isolate. When you take a plant, and in this case, the hemp plant. And there's a difference between the hemp plant and the marijuana plant, and I don't have probably time to go into that difference. It's in the book, but it's both the cannabis plant, right? So if you take the hemp plant and you distill or you extract the oil out of that plant, you're going to get a product that has multiple things in there, like essential oils. When you extract from peppermint, you just don't have menthol. You have another few hundred components, or lavender. It's a full spectrum because you get all these what we call terpenes. Terpenes are the stuff that smells, right, either good or bad.
Right.
And so you get it all into a product. And so this is why we call it spectrum. The fuller the spectrum, the worse it tastes typically, because it still has chlorophyll in there, stuff that tastes very bitter. So the industry today is really trying to refine it, remove those pieces to make it somewhat palatable, and then you get a full, or what they call also a broad spectrum, which is a little less than full. Now, you can go to the point where you use about 5 or 6 steps in the extraction process where you get only the CBD out of the hemp plant. Nothing else. 0 THC, which is kind of the chemical formula for marijuana, but 0 of these terpenes that smell, either good or bad, 0 of other cannabinoids. There's at least 200 of these substances in the hemp plant. And so you isolate it. Now, the problem with that is that when you have an isolate, it's working alone. So in my book, I have an example where I describe a guy carrying a piano to the upper floor. Well, if you have to carry that piano by yourself, it's a lot of work. If you call your so-called entourage, which is a friend word for people that surround you, then it's much easier. So you call all your friends, and now you lift that piano up like just in the few easy steps you upstairs. So this is called the entourage effect, right? So when you have a full spectrum product, it has entourage effect. It has other terpenes and cannabinoids and all kind of substances that work together. So a lot of people like that because they feel the effect combined, compared to an isolate, where the isolate is the single guy. Now, the beauty, and this is why I got to essential oils pretty quickly, is the terpenes and all those I cannot control if I get a full spectrum. It's whatever they extract. And so I cannot really control what I wanted them to do, those terpenes. Now, when I take an essential oil, for example, lavender, I know that lavender, most of the stuff in lavender is more like calming. So I also know that CBD is calming. So if I want to have a personalized, targeted, very individualized CBD, I'll combine the isolate back with all the terpenes that I find in lavender. So I combine the CBD, the isolate, the one guy, together with like the full team of lavender. And now I have a CBD lavender mix, for example, that is very calming. Now, my muscle hurts a little bit after workout. Now, maybe I'll take something like copaiba or something like peppermint, where I know it goes to opioid receptors in my spinal cord and might help with these kind of, not so funny conditions for my muscle or my joints. And so now I have a way to take a CBD isolate and combine it in multiple ways with multiple different oils and create targeted solutions. And that's what we call smart CBD. Right? It's different than full spectrum or broad spectrum. It's smart. It's isolated and recombined to get this entourage effect back.
All right,
and
excellent.
That's just fascinating.
Now, for folks that are worried about THC, I know that you touched on the extraction process, so they would extract just only the cannabidiol out of it.
Yes.
For folks that are worried about THC problems, I deal with a lot of first responders. That could be an issue, right, or pilots or whatever. Yes. Is this a really good process, the CBD extraction process, and then of course testing with third party? Is that a really good way to make sure that there's no CBD or no THC in the products?
It's the only way, because your risk, if you take a full spectrum or broad spectrum, however they want to call it, you're taking THC. Now, the only question is how much do you get? So the problem with today's CBD is that when you look at the scientific research, where they just tested a bunch of products from a bunch of manufacturers and sellers, it's like we know that when you take full spectrum, about 80% of that is not clean. It contains solvents, heavy metals, all kind of bad stuff in there. So you don't want that, because the hemp plant is sucking that bad stuff out of the soil. It's called a bioaccumulator, because it's really good to clean out fields over time, but that stuff ends up in your product. So this is the number one thing you have to be careful. Number two thing, we know, again, according to research, that last year, about 75% of labels were mislabeled. There's a bunch of products that are overlabeled, a bunch of products are underlabeled. There are CBD products with 0 CBD, and there was even one found with 40% marijuana in it, which is probably the strongest you can get in marijuana.
Wow.
So, yeah, you buy a full spectrum, you're responsible if you get a positive drug test, right? Because THC will sooner or later show. It's also the amount that you take, because even if it's below 0.3%, which is the legal limit, if you take a lot of it, you just accumulate that stuff and it may show up in the drug test. So the only way to really be sure that you're going to be negative on a drug test is to take CBD isolate, because CBD isolate has 0 THC in it. So that way you can be sure. Now, the problem we have with drugs testing is a general problem. You take drugs like Advil or ibuprofen, Motril, all these things. Well, you might test positive for a drug that you don't have, because they cross-react in the test, right? So people need to know that. So they can also show positive if they never even looked at the CBD or THC product in their life, right? So, but that's drug testing. It's a problem by itself. But if you want to take products from the hemp plant, if you want to be absolutely safe on the drug testing side, you need to go with CBD isolates. And so here again, you're losing a lot of effect on a CBD isolate because you don't get that entourage, but you recombine it back with essential oil, you recreate it, and you have a full spectrum, but not really full spectrum because it's 0 THC. So that's how you do it.
That's excellent information. So you've got a book. Can you tell us just a little bit about kind of your inspiration for the book, and then where folks can go to get that?
Yeah. So, of course, the inspiration is education, education, education. People are so confused. It's the Wild West out there in the U.S. It's like, so suddenly it's legal, but it's still not legal in some states, right? Because on a federal level, it's legal now, but on the state level, of course, the states can decide whatever they want. But in most states now, it's legal. The USPS, the Post Services, just put out a paper how they transport it, what the rules are. TSA just put out some rules. So it is legal, but you still need to check with your own states, right? So having said that, it's just about education. People are completely confused. What is CBD, cannabidiol, as you just mentioned, or what is THC? What is marijuana? What's the difference? So I had to figure out a way to, one, tell them what is the difference? How do you get to one or the other from the same plant? What's the legal landscape? And I already have to write in the book. By the time you read that book, it's already changed. And
right.
It's true, because last week, Ohio just approved it, right?
Right.
So, and then, of course, I needed to go into this wonderful, fantastic system that we were created with called this Endocannabinoid System. Now, why is it called endocannabinoid system? That's the system of all these receptors and components that will attach to the receptors and enzymes that will break down and build up these receptors and the components, and then orders who transport that back and forth in your body. So it's pretty complex, but it has four major pieces. Now, it's called endocannabinoid system because, the researchers were fascinated with marijuana since ever. The first research is like almost 200 years old. And so then suddenly they discover, okay, there's marijuana, there's THC in it and CBD. So then suddenly they isolate THC, and then 20, 30 years later, they isolate CBD. And then in the 90s, suddenly they found these receptors. They call them CB1, CB2 receptor, and CB stands for cannabinoid. And bang, here you have a cannabinoid system. What they didn't understand is that it's a fantastic, a miraculous system that we were created with. And it's not just about cannabinoids, but because it was created in the 90s, that word, now everything runs under that system named endocannabinoid system. So I felt it was an urge in me to start educating people that this is way bigger than we ever thought. It's not just about CBD, it's about all these plants. This is why I combine the essential oils with that. And I also needed to tell people, look, you need to be careful where you buy, what you buy, because it's not really cool. A lot of stuff is Wild West right now. Everybody claims to be clean. Nobody is, or very few are. And there's nobody checking that. And the FDA is struggling right now with making the law. And, because now people want to eat that stuff. So it needs to become a dietary supplement. But
Right.
It cannot be because the FDA last year approved a drug with CBD. Natural CBD, purified, is now a drug. And because it's now a drug, it cannot be something else, right? And so it's so backwards, but it's the way the law works in the U.S.
Wow.
So now the FDA has to still announce it that it's going to be a food, a dietary supplement. So at this point, it's still a drug, and therefore it could only be prescribed by a physician and stuff and sold in a pharmacy, right? But CBD is sold everywhere. So it's the Wild West right now, and the FDA is struggling to keep up. So all these things I just had to write down to educate people so they know what they're dealing with, and not being like overrun by all these people making these wild claims about their products. So this is why I wrote the book. It has three parts. The first part is really explaining what is CBD, how it's extracted, all that. The second part is about this endocannabinoid system, which is much bigger than we ever thought. And the third part is about essential oils and combining them with CBD.
All right, excellent.
And you're asking where do you get it? Well, you get it at drolly.com/store. Dr. Ollie, so you just write out the name doctor and then the three letters OLI. drolly.com/store, and you can order it. And in fact, tomorrow, August 8th, is the National CBD Day. And if you order starting tomorrow morning, there is a 30% sale on it for celebrating the National CBD Day. So this is where you go and get the book. And it's the first of its kind, and nobody else has ever written about this kind of stuff.
Well, that's wonderful. We're so happy you wrote this book.
Yeah, it was an awesome book. In fact, I picked it up at convention and I started reading it while I was still at convention. It was a great book, great resource. I teach on this as well, and definitely, Dr. Ollie, your words are being used all over the world.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. Thanks for taking the time to come on our show here in San Antonio, and I guess we'll see you hopefully very, very soon at one of your lectures, because I know you're lecturing all over the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, let me just plug in the advertisement one more time. So people who are interested in the book, drolly.com/store. People who want to know more about it, I have my Facebook site at facebook.com Dr. Ollie, and then Instagram at Dr. Olivier Wenker. But those people that are listening now and are interested in joining this wonderful, fascinating world of essential oils and CBD, and they not belong to Young Living Essential Oils, they can contact me under CBD at drolly.com, CBD at drolly.com. So that way, my team and I will take care of these people and educate them and help them.
And they'd be lucky to have you.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Dr. Ollie. We appreciate you. You have a great rest of the week, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, happy CBD Day.
Yes. Take care, Dr. Ollie. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye-bye.